My girlfriend told me she'd been bonded to a system. It let her see a demand index for how much everyone around her needed her. At first, her eyes had gone red with tears. Your number is only 30. Does that mean you don't love me? Not needing you doesn't mean I don't love you, I told her. After that, she started holding an umbrella for her male assistant on rainy days and driving out of her way to take him home. When I asked why, she brushed it off. Don't overthink it. His number was just high, so I figured he needed the help. Then I came down with a fever and took to my bed. And she chose to go shopping with him instead. Number's low, but his side is more urgent. Let me finish helping him first. Then I'll come look after you. She shut the door behind her. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then picked up my phone. Mom. I'm coming home alone this new year. I didn't know how long I'd been asleep. Thirst finally woke me. I heard the fingerprint lock click open behind me. But I didn't turn around. Kimberly Nickel came in, wearing house slippers, and stopped a few feet behind me. How are you feeling? You didn't answer any of my texts. I said nothing. She stepped closer and reached for my forehead. But I caught the sharp, woodsy scent of Gary Yoch's cologne clinging to her. And turned my face away. Her hand dropped. Right, she said coolly, with a number like yours could possibly be wrong. Her eyes drifted upward, hovering somewhere above my head again. My throat felt raw. Can't you just turn my number off? Can't you look at me just once without it? He told me once that the system could be switched off. Kimberly didn't answer. She set a bag on the coffee table. Something for the fever. Use it. I crouched beside the table, my hands shaking slightly as I worked at the knot. Then she added, Gary got it for you. He heard you weren't feeling well and picked it up on the way. Be nicer to him. He's a good kid. And he barely started working. Inside were ibuprofen, cold medicine, cooling patches, and 2 slips of paper. One was a pharmacy receipt. The other was a purchase confirmation for an expensive, custom-tailored suit. Paid for at 4:24 that afternoon. I stared at it for 2 seconds, tucked it back under the medicine, and pressed a cooling patch to my forehead. Then I got up. I'm tired tonight. Sleep in the guest room. I closed the bedroom door before she could answer. Later, her phone rang in the living room. Kimberly answered in a low voice, soft laughter slipping between her words. And then the sound moved toward the door. A moment later, the latch clicked shut. My phone buzzed once beneath the pillow. I didn't look at it by the next day. My fever had broken, my throat still hurt. The message I'd ignored the night before was from my mother. Kim's not coming home with you. Is she busy? Her voice caught before lifting again, trying to sound light. That's all right. Busy is good. We'll see her some other time. I stared at the thread, then scrolled up. Mom, who barely bought herself a new shirt all year, had sent selfies in 4 different outfits, asking which would make the best impression on her future daughter-in-law. She'd also sent photos of pot roast. Ever since Kimberly mentioned she liked it, Mom had been making it over and over. It's getting better every time. She's sure to like it, she'd said. I listened once more, then replied. She really has been busy lately. Kimberly was already gone when I left the room. The medicine was neatly set out with croissants, coffee, and a note telling me not to forget breakfast. It had been a long time since she'd bought breakfast for me herself. Ever since the system appeared, it felt like meeting my needs had become a waste. Because my number was low, food was stone cold. I heated it and ate anyway. At the office, I saw Gary getting out of the passenger seat of Kimberly's car, with a breakfast bag so hot. He kept tugging at his earlobe. Kimberly locked the car, and the two of them walked into the building together without looking. My way around noon, Gary found me in the hallway. Hey, Levi. Miss Nickel asked me to pick out gifts for your parents for the holidays. I'm worried my taste isn't good enough. Can you take a look? He handed me his phone at the top of his chat with Kimberly. Her contact name was simply Kim with a little heart around it. Gary scrolled through page after page of gift ideas. Burley's replies were casual. Sure. Your call. Then I saw one line from her near the top. As long as the gesture's there. Old folks don't need anything too expensive. I glanced at the prices. Added together, the gift still didn't come close to the amount on the custom suit receipt I'd found in the medicine bag. Gary seemed to realize I'd seen it and laughed awkwardly. Miss Nichols, just trying to save money. It's not easy for her to make it. No, it's not. I said. So don't bother buying anything. His smile froze and I walked away. That evening, Kimberly was waiting on the couch. Did you give Gary a hard time today? I paused in the entryway. He told you he spent all day researching gifts for your parents. And you shut him down with one line. Don't you feel bad trampling on his good intentions? I really don't understand why you have to be like this. As I put away my shoes, I noticed 2 paper bags on top of the cabinet. The logos were familiar. The 2 cheapest items from the list Gary had shown me. They'd already been bought. Good intentions. He was scrolling through gift guides on company time. You paying him a salary. And why is someone else choosing gifts for my parents? Kimberly frowned. Gary's thoughtful. He understands what older people like. Last month, I asked what to get your parents. And you said anything was fine. Your number was only 34 when you said that. She continued. Gary's number hit 70 just from asking me to grab him a coffee. You clearly never cared that much about the gifts for your parents. Isn't it ridiculous to make an issue of it now? Her gaze drifted above my head again. Numbers, always the numbers. Kimberly used to understand exactly why mine was low. My biological father drank. And when he drank, he hit people. After watching him split my mother's lip, I learned early to read a room. Stay quiet and ask for as little as possible. Even after Mom remarried a gentleman, I still couldn't bring myself to depend on anyone. In high school, people mistook that for arrogance. They mocked me for refusing help and whispered about my family. Kimberly had been the one person who stood up for me. He's first in the whole class every single time. She told them. He's made it this far on his own. Could any of you have done the same? Later when we were together, she held me and said, you only learned to grow up so fast because things were hard before. Levi, I want to be good to you. You don't owe me an explanation. I'll support you from now on. I held on to those words for years. Kimberly was the only person I'd ever truly let myself reach for. And now she'd forgotten all of it. 6 months with the system. And the independence she once admired had become proof that I wasn't worth caring for. I turned toward the bedroom. But Kimberly grabbed my wrist. Her fingertips trembled. Levi, why has your number dropped so much? I paused. Dropped to what? Her mouth opened before she finally answered. 15. There's still 15, huh? I glanced down at her hand around my wrist. 15 or 30? Does it make any difference to you? She went quiet, then laughed coldly. No, it really doesn't. Didn't you tell me yesterday to turn your number off? Fine, I'll turn it off. Your number was never worth looking at anyway. All it does is put me in a bad mood. From now on, don't even bother telling me what you need. Her grip tightened as she stared at me as if waiting for something. Fine, I said. Then I looked at her hand. Let go. After a long moment. She did. I turned away. Behind me, her voice rose sharply. Do you still want me to come home with you for the holidays? I only turned down a project to go in the first place. If this is the attitude you're going to have, I'm not going anymore. I paused, waiting. I didn't answer. Kimberly kept going. Gary can't handle that project alone. He's already working overtime through the holidays. And I feel bad enough about it. I can already guess his number's going to break 80 probably. I finished for her. Silence fell behind me. I'd already bought a ticket home alone. But hearing her say she wasn't coming still tightened something in my chest. A year ago, he curled against me and asked when she could finally meet my parents. Properly. She'd been more eager than I was. Now she had changed. I turned around. Kimberly. If someday his number gets high enough that he wants to sleep with you, would you go through with it? She stared at me and gave a short laugh. Levi, do you even hear yourself right now? What am I to Gary? A supervisor to her subordinate. He works hard and somehow in your head. That turns into cheating. Holding an umbrella for him. Driving him home, buying his coffee. Bringing him breakfast, buying him a suit. That was only what I'd seen. I had no idea how much more there was that I hadn't. I'm only asking about the number. I said. If that day comes, what would you choose? Kimberly's voice sharpened. You're convicting me over a hypothetical fine. Then let me ask you one, too. If you weren't so paranoid, do you think we'd be fighting like this? He stepped closer. Can you try having a little empathy? Put yourself in his shoes. A kid barely out of college. And his boss gives him a cold shoulder every day. How do you think that feels? Looked at her. You've never once asked how I feel. I can see exactly how you feel. It's right there in that pathetic little number over your head. What am I supposed to do? Cuddle someone every day who doesn't even want to be cuddled? I stared at her. Is a straight answer really so hard to give me? She was still breathing hard when she finally snapped. No, there. Are you satisfied? Then she marched to the entryway, grabbed the 2 paper bags and hurled them to the floor. I'm going on a business trip for 2 weeks. I won't be back before the holidays. You better think carefully. If you still want to see me at your parents' place. The door slammed behind her. The apartment slowly went quiet. Maybe it was better that she'd left. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my hand. I'd been clenching it so long. The color hadn't returned yet. Then I started packing my clothes. 2 years in that apartment. And everything that truly belonged to me fit into a few storage bags. The next day I handed in my resignation. The HR manager stopped by and joked. Heading home. To get married. I smiled without explaining. Don't tell her yet. For the rest of my working days. I showed up as usual. On my last day. I used my remaining holiday leave to buy gifts for my parents. By evening, all that remained was the suitcase I was taking with me. At the entryway, I tapped the electronic lock a few times. Fingerprint deleted, it announced. I looked back once. The couch cushions were neat. And the fever medicine still sat where Kimberly had left it. Everything she'd given me was still there. I hadn't taken a single piece of it. The suitcase wheels rolled over the threshold. And I shut the door behind me quietly without a sound. The night air outside the railway station tasted like crushed iron and frozen pine. I dragged my suitcase through the thin layer of slush covering the platform. The wheels made a dry, hollow rattle against the asphalt, a sound that seemed to hum. Right through the soles of my shoes and up into my teeth. Around me, people were shouting greetings, breath pluming white under the yellow fog of the sodium lamps. Families were reuniting, bags dropped into snowdrifts, arms wrapped tight around thick wool coats. I pulled my scarf higher over my chin, settled my hands deep into my pockets, and walked toward the exit. My phone buzzed once in my coat pocket. I didn't pull it out to look. I already knew what it wasn't. It wasn't Kimberly asking if I had reached the station safely. It wasn't Kimberly asking if my throat still burned from the fever. When I crossed the threshold of the terminal, I saw them standing near the pickup line. My mother was wearing a long, dark red padded coat, one of the 4 she'd taken photos in 2 weeks ago. She looked smaller than I remembered, her graying hair tucked behind her ears, her toes tapping against the curb to keep warm. Next to her stood my stepfather, Uncle Lynn, holding a large thermos wrapped in an old hand towel. Levi. My mother saw me first. She didn't run, her knees had been bad since the years she spent standing on concrete floors at the textile factory, but she hurried as fast as she could, her arms already opening before she reached me. When she hugged me, the smell of damp wool and cold air enveloped me, underlaid by the faint, distinct scent of star anise and toasted sesame oil. Look at you, she said, pulling back to squeeze my shoulders, her eyes searching my face with that terrifying, instinctual accuracy mothers have. You've lost weight. Your cheeks are sunken. Was the train crowded? It wasn't bad, Mom, I said. My voice was still raspy from the fever, rough around the edges. Uncle Lynn stepped forward, unscrewing the top of the thermos with a heavy, calloused twist. Drink this first. Pear and honey soup. Your mother simmered it since 5 this afternoon. I took the metal cup. Steam rose up, scalding my nose, carrying a thick coat of sugar sweetness that made my raw throat ache in relief. I took a slow sip. It was hot enough to bring tears to my eyes, but I didn't stop until the cup was half empty. Where's my mother paused, her eyes darting over my shoulder toward the crowd flowing out of the station doors, her voice dropping into that careful, walking on eggshells tone she used whenever she was afraid of breaking something. Did Kim take a different train? Is she coming on the morning Express? I swallowed the warm liquid, set the metal lid back onto the thermos, and looked at her. She's not coming, Mom, I said quietly. She's not coming at all. My mother froze for a fraction of a second. Her hand, which had been reaching to take my small carry-on bag, hovered in the air between us. I saw the question rise in her eyes, the dozens of photos she'd taken, the pot roast she'd cooked 5 different times until the meat fell apart at the touch of a chopstick, the extra duvet she'd bought and aired out on the balcony for 3 days straight. Then, faster than I expected, the question vanished. She smoothed down the front of her red coat, took my bag out of my hand despite my protest, and turned toward the parking lot. That's fine, she said, her voice bright, almost too loud against the quiet rumble of the winter night. She's a big manager now. Important work. It's good to be busy when you're young. Come on, your stepdad parked the van near the heated display case. Let's get home before the soup freezes. She turned and walked ahead, her small frame swaying slightly under the weight of my bag. Uncle Lin fell into step beside me, putting a heavy, warm hand on the small of my back. He didn't ask anything either. He just pressed his hand there, solid and firm, anchoring me against the wind blowing across the snow. The old apartment smelled like dried orange peels and clean cloth. It was a 3-room flat on the 3rd floor of a brick building constructed in the late 90s. The radiators hissed and clunked in the corners, releasing a dry, intense heat that smelled subtly of old paint. My old room was exactly as I had left it 3 years ago, except for the bed. The mattress was covered in brand new, thick floral sheets, crisp and stiff from being freshly washed and ironed. On the desk lay a fresh stack of notepad paper and 2 new pens, as if my mother thought I might still need to do high school homework. Get washed up, my mother called from the kitchen. The chop of a cleaver against wood echoed down the short hallway. The pot roast needs another 10 minutes to soften. I stood in the center of the small room. I unpacked my suitcase, the single suitcase that contained everything I owned from the city. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of trousers, a laptop, my documents, and the small wooden box where I kept my old high school graduation photo. I took out my phone and laid it flat on the desk. The screen lit up. A string of notification alerts popped up from the company group chat. Gary Yoch, thanks to Miss Nickel for guiding me through the Q4 report tonight. Still so much to learn. Image, 2 coffee cups next to a laptop screen showing a midnight timestamp. Kimberly Nickel, good work. Pay attention to the supply chain margins on page 14. There was no private message from her. Not even an inquiry as to whether my train had arrived on time. I looked at the notification for a long moment, then tapped the settings icon. Slid down to the bottom of the screen, and selected log out. Then I took out the SIM card, laid it beside the phone, and picked up the local card Uncle Lin had bought for me the week before. I slid it into the tray and pushed it shut. The phone restarted. The screen was completely clean. No work groups. No Gary. No Kimberly. I walked into the bathroom to wash my hands. The mirror was old, spotted with dark silver rot around the edges. I looked at my reflection, the pale skin, the faint blue circles beneath my eyes, the set of my jaw that had looked tight and guarded for 6 months straight. In Kimberly's eyes, above this face of mine, there had been a floating number. 30, then 15. A number that meant he doesn't need me enough. A number that translated, in her mind, into a permission slip to go where the numbers were higher, where the desperation was louder, where her presence could feel like a salvation instead of a routine. I dipped my hands into the warm water, splashed it over my face, and held it there until my skin burned red. When I came out to the dining table, the room was filled with steam. A huge porcelain bowl sat in the center, overflowing with dark, glistening chunks of beef, thick slices of radish, and dark brown sauce that bubbled softly around the edges. My mother sat across from me, handing me a bowl of steamed rice packed so tightly it formed a smooth white dome above the rim. Eat, she said simply. It's hot. I picked up my chopsticks, took a piece of the beef, and put it in my mouth. The meat was tender, falling apart into rich, savory strands before I even chewed. The star anise and ginger had cut straight through the heavy richness, leaving a warmth that settled deep in my stomach. Is it good? My mother asked. She was leaning forward, her hands clasped tightly under the edge of the table, her eyes wide with a strange, nervous tension. I made it 4 times last week. Uncle Lin had to eat beef until his skin almost turned red. I thought maybe I put too much sugar in the 3rd batch, so I reduced it today. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and looked up at her. It's perfect, Mom, I said. It's the best thing I've eaten all year. My mother sat back slowly. Her chest heaved once, a long, shaky breath escaping her lips, and then she smiled. It wasn't the polite, bright smile she'd used at the station. It was smaller, softer, carrying a faint wet sheen in the corners of her eyes. Good, she whispered, picking up her own chopsticks. Eat more then. There's a whole pot left in the kitchen. Across the table, Uncle Lin didn't say a word. He just reached out with his chopsticks and placed 2 large pieces of radish into my bowl, then picked up his small glass of grain liquor and took a silent, satisfied sip. Here, in this small, overheated room, there were no numbers above anyone's head. There was no demand index. There was only a pot of stew cooked 5 times to get it right, a red coat worn to a cold train platform, and a silence that didn't feel like an accusation. 500 miles away, in the VIP lounge of a hotel in the coastal city of S. Kimberly Nickel was staring at her tablet screen with a slight, persistent crease between her eyebrows. Miss Nickel? Gary Yoch leaned over the small marble table, holding a fresh cup of hot milk tea with extra sugar. His hair was meticulously styled, slightly tousled at the front to give him that hard-working, late-night intern look he'd perfected over the last 3 months. I bought this from the shop down the street, Gary said, his voice dropping into that soft, slightly hesitant pitch that always made him sound like a younger brother seeking approval. I remembered you said your stomach hurts when you drink cold water on business trips. I had them add half sugar. Kimberly didn't look up immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the air above Gary's head. There, glowing with a soft, neon red light that only she could see, was a floating double-digit number. 82. It had jumped 2 points since they boarded the plane this morning. When Gary had tripped over his own luggage near the check-in counter and looked at her with wide, panicked eyes, the number had flickered from 80 to 82. He needs me, the system's smooth, mechanical voice echoed softly in the back of her mind. Without your intervention, this subject will suffer professional setback and high emotional anxiety. Current value, high. Kimberly felt a familiar sense of cold satisfaction fill her chest. It was the feeling of being essential. It was the absolute certainty that her presence mattered, that she was the weight keeping someone else's world from tipping over. She accepted the cup. Thanks, Gary. Have you finished double-checking the slides for tomorrow's pitch? I worked on them until 2 last night, Gary said, scratching his neck awkwardly. His number flickered, 83. Mainly the financial forecasts. I'm still a bit confused about the tax rebates for foreign entities. Levi usually handles that part, right? I tried texting him yesterday to ask for his old templates. But he didn't reply. Kimberly's fingers tightened slightly around the paper cup. Don't worry about him, she said, her tone flatting instantly. He's back in his hometown, playing the filial son. Oh, Gary said, watching her face carefully. Did he leave without helping you pack? I saw his desk before we left. It was completely cleared out. Even his mouse pad was gone. I thought maybe he was transferred to another department. He took his annual leave early, Kimberly said curtly. Her left eye twitched slightly. She picked up her personal phone from the table. She opened her messages with Levi. The last message she had sent was 3 days ago, right after she slammed the door of their apartment. I'm going on a business trip for 2 weeks. I won't be back before the holidays. You better think carefully if you still want to see me at your parents' place. There had been no reply. No have a safe flight. No call me when you land. No I was wrong. She tapped his profile. She tried to initiate a voice call. The number you are calling is unavailable or powered off. Kimberly sneered softly, setting the phone screen down on the table. Childish, she thought. He took out his SIM card just to make a point. He's trying to play hard to get. Just like when he was in high school, hiding behind that stone-cold face of his, pretending he doesn't care about anyone. She remembered the way his number had dropped to 15. 15, that pathetic, shivering little double digit. It was an insult. It meant that even if she walked out that door and never came back, Levi's world would barely register the vibration. He didn't need her. He had his self-reliance, his trauma-forged independence, his quiet, impenetrable wall. Let him sit in his cold little hometown, she thought bitterly. Let him see how far his pride gets him when he realizes I'm not there to clean up his life. Miss Nickel? Gary's voice pulled her back. He was looking at his laptop screen with an expression of genuine, helpless terror. The client just sent an email. They moved the meeting up to 8 tomorrow morning. And they want the printed copies of the third-party audit. His number flashed violently above his head, 87. Calm down, Kimberly said, taking a sip of the milk tea. The taste was sickly. Sweet, far too much syrup, leaving a sticky film on her tongue. But she swallowed it down, rising from her chair with a commanding authority that made her chin tilt upward. Call the front desk. Have them print 30 copies on heavy card stock. If their business center is closed, we'll find a print shop nearby. I'll review the tax rebates with you right now. Sit down. Thank you, Miss Nickel, Gary breathed, his face relaxing into an expression of intense, hero-worshipping relief. I don't know what I'd do without you. I really don't. The glowing 87 hovered above his forehead, bright and vibrant. Kimberly sat back down, pulling his laptop toward her. But as she began typing, an odd, prickling sensation settled in the back of her neck. For the first time since the system had appeared 6 months ago, the high number didn't feel like a crown. It felt heavy. Like a wet wool blanket thrown over her shoulders, pulling her down into the chair, smelling slightly of sour milk, tea and cheap cologne. She shook her head, clearing the thought, and began editing Gary's flawed slides. By the third day of the New Year holiday, the snow in my hometown had stopped. I spent the mornings helping Uncle Lynn fix the wooden latch on the back alley gate and the afternoons sitting by the window in the living room, reading old paperbacks I found in the local secondhand bookstore. My throat had completely healed. The dark circles under my eyes had faded, replaced by the healthy, quiet flush that comes from sleeping 8 hours a night without dreaming of spreadsheets, suit receipts, or red neon numbers hovering over my head. On the afternoon of the fourth day, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar local number. I answered. Hello? Is this Levi? A crisp, energetic female voice came through the speaker. I'm Zhou Min from the HR department at headquarters. I'm calling to verify a few details regarding your final settlement. Hi, Ms. Zhou, I said, leaning against the window frame. Go ahead. Your resignation took effect officially on the 31st, she said, the sound of keyboard clicks rustling in the background. Your unused annual leave covers the rest of the notice period. I just wanted to confirm your remaining compensation, including the year-end performance bonus approved by Vice President Chen before he left, will be transferred to your registered card on the 15th of next month. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. There was a short pause on the line. Then Ms. Zhou's voice lost some of its formal tone, dropping into a lower, curious register. Levi, did you really not tell Director Nickel before you handed in the paperwork? The handover documents were submitted directly to VP Chen, I said calmly. It was within my rights. Well, yes, Ms. Zhou sighed, a low chuckle escaping her. It's just, things are a bit chaotic here today. The holiday ended yesterday, and everyone came back this morning. Director Nickel just stormed into the HR office 5 minutes ago demanding to know why your seat was assigned to a new hire from the regional office. I held the phone, looking out the window at a stray ginger cat picking its way carefully across the snow-covered wall. What did you tell her? I asked. I showed her the signed resignation form, Ms. Zhou said, sounding almost sympathetic. You should have seen her face, Levi. She literally stood there, staring at the signature page for 2 full minutes without speaking a word. She kept saying there must be an error, that you only took leave to go home for the holidays. I had to pull up the electronic system log to show her the date. Stamp, you submitted it 3 weeks ago. I see, I said. Thank you for letting me know, Ms. Zhou. Are you really not coming back to the city? She asked softly. No, I said. I'm staying here. I'm taking a job at the local logistics center. Next month. Well, good luck, Levi. You were the calmest guy in that whole department. We're going to miss you. Thank you, Ms. Zhou. Happy New Year. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. A quiet, still peace washed over me, like the silence that settles over a forest after a heavy snowfall. The last thread connecting my name to that office, to that city, to that apartment, had snapped. Across the room, my mother was hanging up fresh laundry on the balcony. She looked back at me, seeing me standing by the window with the phone in my hand. Everything all right, Levi? She called out. Everything's fine, Mom, I said, walking over to grab a basket of wooden clothespins to hand to her. Everything's completely fine. Kimberly Nichols stood in the middle of the living room of apartment 402. The air inside was freezing. The radiator valves had been turned down to the minimum setting, and the faint scent of lemon-scented floor cleaner hung in the silent, still atmosphere. She hadn't taken off her trench coat. Her heels were still firmly planted on the hardwood floor near the entryway. Levi, she called out. Her voice echoed slightly, hitting the bare walls and bouncing back to her. She walked into the main bedroom. The bed was made. The sheets were pulled so taut they looked like marble. The closet door was half open. She reached out and pulled it wide. Her clothes hung on the left side, her coats, her silk blouses, her suits, neat and colorful. The right side was completely empty. Not a single hanger was left on the wooden rod. The bottom shelves, where his shoes used to sit side by side in neat, well-maintained boxes, were entirely clear. Not even a trace of dust remained. The wood had been wiped down with a damp cloth. She turned around sharply and walked into the bathroom. The sink counter was gleaming. Her skincare bottles, her perfume, her hairbrushes were all arranged on the right side. On the left side, where his razor, his simple blue toothbrush holder, and his citrus shaving cream used to sit, there was nothing. She opened the mirrored cabinet. Empty. She ran back out to the living room, her breath suddenly coming fast and shallow, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She dropped to her knees beside the coffee table. The silver tray where they kept spare keys and mail was gone. But there, sitting right in the center of the dark walnut surface, was the neat, unblemished box of fever medicine Gary had picked up 2 weeks ago. Beside it lay 2 pieces of paper. One was the pharmacy receipt for 38 yuan. The other was the purchase confirmation for the custom-tailored suit, 14,800 yuan, paid for with Kimberly's corporate credit card on the afternoon of December 18th. Below the receipt, written on a small, yellow sticky note in Levi's clear, precise handwriting, were 6 words. Left the keys on the counter. Kimberly stared at the yellow note. Her vision blurred slightly around the edges. System, she whispered, her voice trembling, harsh in the empty room. System. Locate Levi. Show me his number. A soft, chime-like sound vibrated in her skull. Command acknowledged. Scanning target, Levi. A glass-like interface materialized before her eyes, floating over the bare living room wall. Target, Levi demand index, null. Kimberly froze. What do you mean null? Is it 0? Is it 5? Show me the number. Target has severed all emotional, logistical, and psychological dependencies on the host. The system's voice responded, cold, neutral, devoid of any inflection. Demand index cannot be calculated when dependency reaches absolute 0. Target no longer registers as a valid subject within the host's sphere of influence. No, Kimberly muttered, her fingers clawing at the wooden edge of the coffee table. That's impossible. He loves me. He's lived with me for 2 years. He said he would support me. He's just throwing a tantrum because I spent time with Gary. He's being childish. Correction, the system chimed instantly. Target's historical demand index was low due to high self-regulation and emotional resilience formed through early childhood adaptation. Host misinterpreted low demand index as absence of value. Host repeatedly reallocated energy toward high demand targets. Kimberly's eyes widened. What does that mean? High demand index definition, the system continued, its mechanical tone cutting through her chest like a scalpel. Measures parasitic reliance, incompetence, manipulative distress behaviors, and resource absorption needs. High demand index does not indicate high love. It indicates high drain. The words hung in the cold air of the apartment like ice needles. Parasitic reliance. Incompetence. High drain. Kimberly's mind flashed back, the rainstorms where Gary sat in her passenger seat, shivering until she gave him her coat, the late-night coffee runs, the custom suit paid for because he claimed he had nothing respectable to wear to the annual client dinner, the endless questions about basic spreadsheets, the milk tea bought with too much syrup that left her stomach aching. Every single time Gary's number had spiked to 70, 80, 85, it hadn't been because he cherished her. It had been because he was leaning his entire lazy, entitled weight onto her shoulders, sucking up her time, her money, and her authority. While she smiled, feeling like a savior. And Levi, who had suffered through a childhood of violence, who had learned to sew his own buttons, cook his own meals, heal his own fevers, and never ask for a single favor because he didn't want to be a burden to anyone he loved. Levi had offered her his quiet, unbreakable strength. He had offered her a space where she didn't have to be a manager, a savior, or a boss, just a partner. And she had looked at his quiet strength, looked at his low number, and called it pathetic. Kimberly slumped onto the floor, her trench coat crumpling around her. She looked at the bare walls, the empty shoe rack, the pristine, untouched coffee table. Her phone buzzed in her handbag. She grabbed it with shaking hands, her heart leaping into her throat. Levi? She pulled it out. It was Gary. Gary Yoch, Miss Nickel, I'm so sorry to bother you on your first day back, but the finance department rejected the invoice for the suit. They said it wasn't pre-approved by VP Chin. Can you call them and tell them it was an emergency business expenditure? Also, my apartment's hot water heater broke this morning. Do you know a good plumber? I'm kind of overwhelmed right now. Image, sad face emoji. Above the phone screen, in her mind's eye, Gary's number flashed brightly, 89. It looked like a glaring, blood-red neon sign hanging over a trash pile. Kimberly stared at the text message. She felt a surge of violent, suffocating nausea rise from her stomach into her throat. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles turned white, her breath coming in ragged, ugly gasps. She didn't reply. She threw the phone against the far wall. It struck the plaster with a loud crack and slid onto the floor, its screen shattered into a spiderweb of black glass. 2 weeks later, the northern town of L was hit by an early February freeze. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, heavy with unfallen snow. The streets were quiet, the small shops along the main road flying red lanterns left over from the New Year festivities. I was standing outside the local logistics center office, wearing a dark blue padded work jacket and thick leather gloves. We had just finished offloading 3 trucks of seasonal produce, and steam was rising off my arms into the cold air as I unclasped my gloves. Levi. Take a break, drink some tea. Old Zhao, the floor manager, shouted from the glass-walled guardhouse, waving a porcelain mug toward me. Your mom dropped off a box of steamed buns 20 minutes ago. They're still hot. Thanks, Zhao, I called back, smiling. I pulled off my gloves and walked toward the office. Before I reached the door, the sound of car tires crunching heavily over ice caught my attention. A sleek, white BMW sedan, coated in thick gray road dust and dried mud from a long-distance drive, pulled up to the curb right in front of the gate. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was wearing a beige cashmere coat that looked far too thin for the northern wind. Her hair was tangled, her eyes bloodshot, her face pale and drawn, without a trace of the sharp, immaculate makeup she used to wear every morning. She looked at the logistics sign, looked at the stacks of wooden pallets, and then her eyes landed on me. Levi, she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the passing delivery tricycles, but I saw her lips form the shape of my name. I stopped near the glass door of the guardhouse. I didn't walk forward. I didn't step back. I just stood there, holding my work gloves in my left hand, watching her. Kimberly stumbled slightly as her designer boots hit the icy patch on the curb. She regained her balance and hurried toward me, her arms reaching out as if she wanted to grab my sleeves, but she halted 3 feet away, stopped by the absolute, unyielding stillness in my eyes. Levi. Her breath came out in ragged, frantic gasps. I found your mother's old address in the emergency contact files at the office. I drove 8 hours. I've been looking for you since 6 this morning. You shouldn't have driven so fast on these roads, I said quietly. My voice was calm, steady, carrying no warmth, but no hatred either. The bridges freeze over. In February. Hearing my voice, tears spilled over Kimberly's lower eyelids, cutting pale trails through the dust on her cheeks. Levi, I'm sorry, she sobbed, stepping closer, her hands trembling as she tried to reach for my wrist. I was wrong. I was so wrong. The system tricked me. I didn't understand what the numbers meant. I thought. You didn't care about me because your number was low. I thought I was helping people who needed me. She lifted her eyes, staring wildly at the space right above my head. Turn it off. I turned it off, she cried, her hands flying to her own temples. As if she wanted to tear her skin open. I forced the system to shut down. I don't care about Gary. I fired him 3 days ago. I don't care about anyone else's number. Levi, please, look at me. I looked at her. I looked at her swollen eyes, her wind-chapped lips, the dirt smudged on the hem of her expensive beige coat. Kimberly, I said softly. She froze, her tears pausing for a second, her face filled with a sudden, desperate hope. Yes? Yes, Levi? I'm listening. The system didn't trick you, I said. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? The system didn't give you a weapon, I said, looking into her eyes with an unflinching clarity. It gave you a mirror. The wind swept down the alley between the warehouses, carrying the faint rustle of dry oak leaves across the concrete floor. It showed you what you wanted to see, I continued, my voice measured and plain. You didn't care about Gary because he was helpless. You cared about Gary because he made you feel powerful. You liked being the one who held the umbrella. You liked being the one who bought the suit. You liked being the savior. Kimberly's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. And me, I said, pointing lightly to my own chest. My low number didn't mean I didn't love you. It meant I respected you too much to make my life your burden. I worked hard so you wouldn't have to carry me. I kept quiet about my past so you wouldn't have to pity me. But to you, a man who stands on his own 2 feet isn't useful. Because a man who doesn't need to be saved can't be controlled. No, Levi, that's not true, she screamed, dropping to her knees on the hard, frozen earth, her hands catching the edge of my thick work jacket. I loved you. I loved the way you taken care of me. I loved how safe I felt with you. Please, come back with me. We can start over. I'll leave the company. We can move anywhere you want. I looked down at her hands gripping my hem. Slowly, carefully, I reached down, took her fingers in my gloved hand, and uncurled them one by one. I took a step back. You loved how safe I made you feel, I said, looking down at her. But you never cared if I felt safe with you. When I had a fever of 103, you left me alone in an empty room to buy a suit for a stranger. That wasn't the system's choice, Kimberly. That was yours. Levi. She whimpered, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently against the winter cold. Go home, Director Nickel, I said. It's going to snow tonight. The highway will be closed by dark. I turned around, pushed open the heavy plastic curtain of the logistics center, and stepped inside. Behind me, the curtain fell shut, sealing out the wind, the cold, and the sound of her weeping. Inside the guardhouse, the radiator was humming softly. Old Zhao had placed 3 thick, white steamed buns on a clean sheet of paper on the table, along with a jar of spicy pickled radish. Who was that lady? Zhao asked, hand pouring hot black tea into a paper cup and handing it to me. Looked like someone from the provincial capital. Car had a fancy plate. An old colleague, I said, taking the cup. The warmth radiated through the paper, heating my calloused palms. She was just delivering some old news. Ah, Zhao said, nodding wisely without pushing further. He bit into a steamed bun, steam rising from the white filling. Your mom's buns are really good. Today. Pork and scallion. She said to make sure you eat at least 3 before you start the afternoon shift. I will, I said. I sat down on the wooden bench beside the window. Outside, the first thick, white snowflakes began to fall, drifting down slowly from the dark plum sky, settling on the dirt-streaked roof of the white BMW. Parked at the curb, covering the tire tracks, covering the mud, smoothing out the rough, broken edges of the road until everything became clean, white, and quiet. Through the glass, I saw Kimberly get back into her car. The headlights flickered on, cutting 2 long yellow beams through the falling snow. The car turned around slowly, its tires spinning once on the ice before finding traction, and then it drove away, disappearing down the long, straight road toward the highway ramp. I pulled out my phone, my new phone, with its clean, quiet screen. I opened the camera app, took a photo of the hot steamed buns and the steaming cup of tea sitting on the wooden table, and sent it to my mother. A second later, a message popped up. Mom, eat while it's hot. Don't let the wind get into your stomach. Uncle Lin is buying a freshwater fish for dinner tonight. We'll steam it with ginger. I looked at the message, smiled, and picked up a bun. The steam rose up, filling my senses with the simple, solid reality of pork, bread, and warmth. There were no numbers in the air. There was no index to keep track of, no score to balance, no worth to prove. I chewed slowly, closed my eyes, and listened to the quiet, steady fall of the snow against the glass.